There is a phrase that, according to the ancient tradition, was inscribed above the throne of King Solomon, the wealthiest, wisest sovereign the ancient world has ever recorded. Not a law, not a command, not a declaration of power or a warning to his enemies. A phrase. 3 words in the Hebrew that, depending on the moment in which Solomon read them, meant something entirely different. In times of triumph, they humbled him. In times of suffering, they carried him. In moments of financial devastation, and there were such moments, even for Solomon, even at the height of his dominion, those 3 words returned him to the one state of mind from which wise decisions and lasting prosperity are possible. I am going to give you that phrase today, and I am going to show you exactly what it means, why it was chosen, and how the families who have preserved this teaching across generations use it not as a piece of history, but as a living daily practice that shapes every significant financial and personal decision they make. This is not a story most people have heard, and even among those who have encountered a version of it, a passing reference, a quote in a motivational context, very few have received the full teaching behind it. The full teaching is what I am here to give you today. My name is Rabbi Naomi, and I have spent 33 years living inside the Kabbalistic and Talmudic wisdom traditions. Not as a reader of books, but as a student inside a lineage, taught directly, face-to-face, in the ancient way, by teachers who received it the same way from their teachers. I grew up in a home where this phrase was present, not displayed as decoration, spoken. My father said it on the morning of the day he signed the largest business contract of his life. He said it again on the morning his business partner of 14 years betrayed him and walked away with half of what they had built together. Same phrase, same 3 words, different circumstance, same result, a return to the ground state from which he could see clearly and act from wisdom rather than from the vertigo of either extreme. What I am going to teach you today is not motivational. It is structural. It will change nothing about your financial circumstances in the moment you receive it. What it will change, if you receive it with the seriousness it deserves and apply it with the daily precision I am going to describe, is the inner orientation from which you meet every financial circumstance. An inner orientation, as every tradition of wisdom and every serious school of behavioral psychology agrees, is the variable that determines outcomes over time more than any other single factor. Stay with me to the very end. This teaching has a warning built into it, a specific description of what happens in the weeks after you begin this practice. And without that warning, most people abandon the practice at the exact moment it is beginning to produce the shift it was designed to produce. Stay. Every word today is connected to every other word, and the end is where the teaching completes itself. Before we go any further, type the phrase Gam Ze Ya'avor in the comments right now. Those are the 3 words. Write them before you continue watching. In our tradition, receiving a teaching and immediately voicing what you have received is not repetition. It is the beginning of internalization. The moment the phrase leaves your lips or your hands in writing, it begins its work in you. Gam Ze Ya'avor. Write it in the comments now. The phrase is Gam Ze Ya'avor. In English, this too shall pass. Now, before you feel the slight deflation that some of you may be feeling right now, the sense of, I have heard this before, this is a greeting card, this is a phrase I have seen on a coffee mug and a motivational poster and the bio of 3 different people I follow on the internet, I need you to hold that reaction carefully, because that reaction is itself a symptom of exactly what this teaching is about. The phrase has been so thoroughly flattened by casual use, so completely stripped of its original structural meaning through centuries of sentimental misapplication, that most people encounter it today as a vague comfort, something you say to a friend who is going through a hard time, something that sounds wise in the moment and means approximately nothing by the following week. It has become the equivalent of a powerful medicine whose label has been left on the bottle, but whose active ingredients were removed so long ago that no one remembers they were ever there. I need you to understand, this phrase, in its original teaching context, was not comfort. It was not a soft reassurance designed to make suffering feel more bearable. It was a precise instrument of perspective, placed above a throne specifically because the throne is where the highest stakes decisions are made, where the temptation to either arrogance or despair is most intense, where the need for a mind that is neither intoxicated by fortune nor crushed by reversal is most critical. Solomon did not look up at those words and feel better. He looked up at them and became clearer. That is not the same thing. Feeling better is a temporary emotional state. Becoming clearer is a structural change in the quality of the mind that is about to act. That stripping away of its precision is not an accident of time. It is the predictable fate of any powerful teaching that enters wide circulation without the transmission of its full depth. The phrase survives. The understanding of what it actually does and why it was placed above Solomon's throne, that has been preserved only within certain lineages. I am going to restore it to you today. Let me tell you first about the throne itself. In the tradition, Solomon's throne is described not merely as a seat of physical power, but as a symbol of mastery over the full range of human experience, the heights and the depths, the abundance and the loss, the seasons of expansion and the seasons of contraction. A king who sits on such a throne must have a mind that does not fuse with any one of these states. A king who becomes intoxicated by his own prosperity loses his judgment. A king who is crushed by his own reversals loses his capacity to act. The throne therefore demanded an occupant whose inner ground was stable enough that neither extreme could uproot him. And the phrase above it was the technology for maintaining that ground. It was not comfort, it was correction. Every time Solomon looked up and read those words, whether in a moment of triumph or devastation, they performed the same function. They returned him to the perspective that transcends the present moment. They reminded him that this, whatever this currently is a condition, not a permanent reality. And from that reminder, clarity returned, judgment returned, the capacity to act from wisdom rather than from the emotional weather of the present moment returned. This is the full teaching, and it has everything to do with money. I want to tell you about a man I will call Benjamin. He came to me 4 years ago, referred by a mutual connection. He was 61 years old, had spent 35 years building a distribution business from a single rented truck and one loyal customer into something that employed 40 people and operated across 3 regions. He had just experienced what he described as the collapse of everything he had constructed. Not a downturn, a collapse. The rapid, humiliating, irreversible kind that required lawyers and liquidation committees and the disposal of assets he had believed would fund his retirement, his children's futures, the quiet dignity of his later years. He sat across from me in my study on a gray October morning, and I saw in him something I have seen before, in people who have experienced the kind of financial reversal that does not only affect the balance sheet, but reaches down into the identity and takes root there. He was fused with the loss. He had become it. Every thought he formed was organized around what had happened. Every sentence he spoke circled back to it. Every plan he tried to make for the future was contaminated at its root by the certainty, not the fear, the certainty that it too would fail. He was not weak. He was simply inside the experience without a single inch of perspective above it. He was, to use the language of the tradition, a king who had fallen off the throne, not because of the circumstances, because of the fusion with the circumstances. The circumstances alone do not destroy a person. The fusion with them does. I taught Benjamin this phrase. Not immediately. First, I sat with him for 2 sessions and simply received his account of what had happened. I did not rush to teach. The tradition is clear that a wound must be witnessed before a teaching can enter it. On the 3rd session, I gave him Gam Ze Ya'avor, and I gave him the full instruction I am about to give you. He was skeptical. He said to me directly, "Rabbi, I am not sure a phrase is what I need right now." I told him, "You are right that a phrase is not what you need. What you need is a practice. The phrase is the door. The practice is what you walk through." He agreed to try. 6 weeks later, he came back to the session and told me something I want to repeat to you, precisely because of how he said it. He said, "I do not feel better about what happened. I have not stopped grieving it, but I have stopped being only what happened. The two things are not the same." His grief was still present. What had changed was his relationship to it. He was no longer fused with the loss in a way that made forward movement impossible. And from that small, crucial separation, from that thin but real layer of perspective between himself and his circumstances, he had begun, within those 6 weeks, to see the field ahead of him rather than only the wreckage behind him. 2 months later, he was in early conversations about a new venture, modest in scale but structurally sound, built on what he had learned rather than on what he had lost. I am not telling you he recovered overnight. I am telling you that the recovery became possible from the moment the fusion broke. And Gam Ze Ya'avor is what broke it. Now let me give you the practice with exactness, because a phrase without a method is a thought. A phrase with a method is a technology. The first instruction: say the phrase in the morning before you engage with any financial information, before the account balance, before the news, before the email with the invoice or the message from the client or the market update. 3 times, aloud, slowly enough that you actually hear each word separately. Gam, pause, Ze, pause, Ya'avor. This is not theatrical. The pause between each word is functional. It forces the mind out of automatic recitation and into active reception. You are not chanting. You are remembering. You are returning. Before the day has had a chance to contract your perspective to the widest available view of your current situation. The second instruction: say it at the peak of any positive financial development. This is the instruction most people find surprising and most resist. When a deal closes well, when income arrives that you were hoping for, when a financial fear resolves better than you expected, say the phrase, Gam Ze Ya'avor. This too shall pass. Not as a way of minimizing the good thing, as a way of keeping your feet on the ground while receiving it. Solomon read those words in triumph as well as in suffering. The tradition understands that the intoxication of success is as dangerous to financial judgment as the paralysis of loss. The person who becomes convinced by a run of good fortune that their judgment has become infallible, that the conditions that produce this success will continue indefinitely, that the caution and discernment that built the thing is no longer necessary now that the thing is built, that person is setting up the next collapse from inside the current success. Gamze Ya'avor in moments of triumph is not pessimism. It is the maintenance of the clear-sighted equilibrium that makes sustained prosperity possible. The third instruction: when a financial fear arises, specifically when you feel the physical contraction of financial anxiety, the tightening in the chest or the stomach, the narrowing of thought that comes when a bill arrives or a deal falls through or an account is lower than you expected, say the phrase before you respond, not instead of responding, before. The gap between the stimulus and the response is the most valuable real estate in human psychology. Gamze Ya'avor is the practice of widening that gap by even a single breath. And in that single breath, in that small pause between the financial fear and the financial reaction, more wisdom is available to you than in the hour of anxious calculation that follows, when the fear is allowed to run uninterrupted. The fourth instruction is specific to financial decisions, and it comes directly from the Solomon tradition. Before any significant financial commitment, signing, investing, releasing a substantial sum, entering a significant obligation, say the phrase and ask yourself one question: am I doing this from the wide view or from the present weather? That is the only question, not whether the numbers are right, not whether the timing is good. Those questions matter, but they are downstream of this one, because a right number analyzed from a contracted, weather-fused mind will produce a different decision than the same number analyzed from the wide view. The phrase returns you to the wide view. The question tells you whether you have arrived there. If the answer is that you are still in the weather, still fused with the fear or the excitement or the present moment, you wait. Not forever, not as an excuse for indefinite postponement. You wait until you can honestly say, I am reading this from above the circumstances, not from inside them. Then you decide. The fifth instruction is about evenings, and it is the one I find produces the deepest long-term shift. Each evening, before sleep, you review the day's financial texture, not the numbers, the texture, the moments of contraction, the moments of ease, the decisions you made and the inner state from which you made them. And you close the review with the phrase, Gamze Ya'avor. Whatever the day was, the difficulty of it, the worry of it, the small victories of it, it has passed. You are not carrying it forward into sleep, into dreams, into the first moments of tomorrow. You are setting it down. The tradition understands that the quality of tomorrow's financial thinking is substantially determined by whether tonight's financial anxiety is allowed to run through the night unchecked. The evening practice is not reflection, it is release, and release, practiced nightly, over weeks and months and years, produces a quality of financial lightness, a freedom from accumulated financial dread that no single strategy or windfall can produce. Now I need to give you the warning I promised, because the practice will be tested, and the test will come in a specific form that I want you to recognize before it arrives. In the early weeks of this practice, often between day 10 and day 25, the phrase will begin to feel hollow. It will feel like repetition without substance, like a word said so many times it has lost its meaning. Your mind will tell you that it is not working, that you are performing a ritual without experiencing a shift, that perhaps this teaching is not for you specifically. I am telling you now, this is not failure. This is the threshold. Every genuine practice in this tradition has a threshold moment, a point at which the surface level of the practice has been exhausted, and what is required to go deeper is the willingness to continue without the reward of feeling. The feeling comes after the threshold, not before it. Almost every person who has brought this practice back to me and said it stopped working was standing at exactly this threshold and did not know it. Stay past it. Say the phrase even when it feels hollow. The hollowness is the sign that the easy layer has been consumed, and the real work is beginning. If you want the full architecture of Solomon's wisdom tradition as it applies to financial life, the complete teaching on the 7 states of mind that this tradition identifies as the conditions for lasting prosperity, each with its corresponding practice and its corresponding phrase from the ancient texts. It is in the resource in the description below. 33 years of transmission condensed into a framework that is practical, precise, and immediately applicable. It is there for the person who is ready to move beyond information and into genuine practice. Share with me in the comments the most honest answer you can give. In this season of your financial life, are you closer to Solomon in triumph or Solomon in loss? You do not need to explain. Just name it, triumph or loss. The answer tells you where the phrase will do its most immediate work. I read every comment. Write it below. If this channel is giving you access to a tradition of wisdom that you feel you are always supposed to encounter, subscribe now. Every week goes this deep. What is coming in the weeks ahead is some of the most layered practical teaching I have released in this format. Subscribe so you are present when it arrives. And if this teaching gave you something today, if the phrase is now in you in a way that it was not an hour ago, press the like button. Not as a gesture of politeness, as an act of transmission. Someone else needs this phrase today. Your press of that button is how it finds them. Do that now. You came here because the title offered you a secret. What I hope you are leaving with is something more valuable than a secret, a practice, a technology that has sat above a throne for 3,000 years, waiting for exactly the kind of person who would encounter it, receive it seriously, and apply it with precision. You are that person. You stayed. That tells me something. Begin tonight. Say the phrase before you sleep. Say it tomorrow before your feet touch the floor. Say it when the good news arrives, and say it when the difficult news arrives, and say it in the hollow middle days when nothing is arriving at all. May Solomon's steadiness become your steadiness. May the wide view become your default. And may what has felt permanent in your difficulty reveal itself, in the fullness of its time, to have been exactly what the phrase always promised it was, passing. Go in peace. Shalom.